Welcome to all of our board members and public and those who are here on our virtual meeting. Um, I believe I saw Sheriff McMahon on the line. Sheriff, you there?
I am, thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. I just wanted to, on behalf of California police chiefs and law enforcement throughout our state, just want to acknowledge Sergeant Baca and his murder earlier this month and service to residents of San Bernardino County and the heroic loss, and express our condolences to your department and to you personally, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, tragic loss, but thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Dr. Raphael.
Okay, so Nancy, would you like to start us off today before we go into the main agenda?
You're on mute, Nancy.
Yeah, we can't hear you, Nancy.
Well, that's embarrassing. Good morning, everyone. I'm Nancy Beninati. I'm a supervising deputy attorney general. Welcome to our second Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board meeting of the year. It's great to have you here. And we have some new board members that we will be welcoming in a few minutes. First, I do want to remind everyone, as Allison did, that we are trying to have a really open profile here. And if you are joining us through video, please make sure you mute your camera and your video, except during public comment period. We also wanted to just remind folks that that we have our website and our email address. If you have any questions before or after the meeting, it's ab953@doj.ca.gov. And it's really great to have you all here. And as I mentioned, we have some new board members, and we're really excited today to have Attorney General Rob Bonta join us for today, part of today's meeting. As you all know, Attorney General Bonta assumed office on April 23rd. He is now the 34th Attorney General of the state of California. He previously served as the Deputy City Attorney in San Francisco from 2003 to 2012. And after that, immediately went to represent the city of Alameda and parts of Oakland in our state assembly. And he's been very well known throughout California for his groundbreaking work on criminal justice and police practices. He was indeed an author of AB 953, this very legislation that gave rise to the board and created the Racial Identity Profiling Act. He also co-authored Senate Bill 10, which made California the first state in the nation to eliminate money bail for suspects awaiting trial and instead replace it with a risk assessment system. And most recently, he served as a lead author on Assembly Bill 1506, which mandates the independent review of officer-involved shootings of unarmed individuals by the California Department of Justice, but also provides really important critically needed services to LEAs to request review of its policies from the Department of Justice. So, as I've said, he has shown very strong leadership on the issue of criminal justice and policing reform, and I'm really honored to welcome him to our meeting today. Attorney General Bonta, would you, I think your screen is muted. Are you able to say a few words? You may be having technical difficulties. Okay, well, he's there. I see him. I saw him a minute ago. But let's then turn to, very quickly, I want to acknowledge some of our new board members. You recently got the message that Amar Kampa-Najjar was sworn in to the RIPA board, and he comes to us from the state assembly, I believe, or the pro tem, one of those two. And it looks like he's having technical difficulties too. But Amar, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. I can't see you, but it's
Yeah,
nice
I'm
to
trying
have
to
you.
get the video going, but I just wanted to quickly just say thank you all. It's an honor to join you all, and I'm grateful for the appointment of Speaker Rendon to this board, and I look forward to working with everybody.
That's great. Thank you so much. As soon as Attorney General Bonta can get back in, he must be having technical difficulties. I know he wanted to welcome you all and say hello and had a few words for you. So I guess Co-Chair Raphael, do you want to proceed with the meeting, and then when Attorney General Bonta can rejoin us, we will continue.
Sure, that would be great. Did we want to go through an introduction of board members since we have a new board member? Just briefly, everyone could introduce themselves. Maybe we could start with Edgar Hampton.
Good
Yes.
morning, everyone. My name is Edgar Hampton. I'm the PORAC representative. PORAC stands for Peace Officer Research Association of California. We represent through the different bargaining groups about 76,000 police officers.
And I guess I'll call on people. How about Felicia Espinosa?
Good morning, Felicia Espinosa here with Root and Rebound. I'm stationed in our Fresno office, but we're a statewide legal nonprofit that help with all the legal barriers outside of the justice system and the impact of mass incarceration. Good morning.
Good morning. Lawanda Hawkins?
Good morning. I represent an organization called Justice for Murdered Children, and we're located here in Southern California.
Chief Swing?
Morning again, David Swing, currently serving as RIPA co-chair and representing California Police Chiefs Association.
Andrea Guerrero?
Good morning, everyone. Andrea Guerrero. I'm the Executive Director at Alliance San Diego. Happy to be here.
Brendan Woods?
Good morning, Brendan Woods, Public Defender of Alameda County, and I'm also representing California Public Defenders Association, so happy to be here.
Lily Kajavi?
Thank you. Lily Kajabi. I'm a professor of mathematics at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles, and especially welcome to our newest board member.
And Sheriff McMahon?
Good morning, John McMahon from Medina County, representing the State Sheriff's Association.
Have I missed Cha Vang?
Morning, everyone. I'm Cha Vang, Deputy Director for AAPI Specific Empowerment, and I'm in Sacramento.
Nancy, have I missed anyone? I'm sorry. Or I apologize if I have.
Co-Chair Raphael, we do have Reverend Nancy Frausto, who is trying to get on. She's having technical difficulties right now, and she represents St. Luke Episcopal Church. So she will hopefully join us later by video or by calling in.
And good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hi, and I'm Amanda Ray. I'm the Commissioner of the California Highway Patrol, and also I wanted to give my condolences to Sheriff and welcome the new member.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. So welcome, Attorney General Bonta. We're excited to have you join us this morning, and I'm glad that technically you're able to join us. The camera's working. So turn it over to Nancy and the Attorney General.
Good morning, Attorney General Bonta. You missed a really great introduction I did of you with all of your accomplishments, but I'm not going to repeat it for everyone, but we're really excited to have you here, and we were hoping that you might have a few words to say to the board this morning.
Definitely, and thank you, Nancy. I heard the first part of the amazing introduction, which I really appreciated, and then I was trying to read your lips for the rest because I lost my sound. So
it was the best introduction ever of any person I've ever done. So
I will capture the recording and we'll use that in the future. So thank you again for your kind words. My apologies for the inconvenience and my lack of tech savviness here, but really excited to be with you. And let me start with a good morning and a huge appreciation for your work, and really appreciate the opportunity to spend time with the board this morning. For just a few remarks, I want to begin by extending my gratitude to all of you who I know have put in a lot of work to make the RIPA board what it is today. And it is a launching pad for reforms and recommendations to tackle racial and identity profiling in our state. And as a former legislator, this is particularly exciting for me to actually help be a part of the implementation of a bill I co-authored alongside now Secretary of State Dr. Shirley Weber and now Los Angeles County Supervisor Holly Mitchell. And I'm proud to have been part of that effort in the California State Assembly, and now once again support this important work as the California Attorney General, a role I view as being the people's attorney. And as I've shared in the past, I learned from my parents. They were both social justice champions who marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and organized with Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and Philip Vera Cruz. And they taught me that when something isn't right, it's time to fight. And when it comes to issues of the magnitude of police stops and providing for public safety in California, it can be hard sometimes to process all of those interactions. And that's why your work is so important. There are hundreds of law enforcement agencies across 58 counties in this state. These agencies are as varied as California is. They serve urban and rural communities and people from all walks of life. And the fact is that if we want to be able to effectively understand and address racial and identity profiling in the state, we need the data. And that's where your critical work comes in. You all help make that happen. You provide critical context and analysis. And what we've seen over the last year is forcing all of us to again confront the realities of systemic inequality and structural racism in our nation. It's been more than a year now since the murder of George Floyd, but we remain in the middle of a racial justice reckoning in this country and in this state. And all across the state here in California, Californians have spoken out about injustice, even in the middle of a pandemic. And they did that to demand accountability, to demand justice, and to demand change. It will take sustained work by all of us to make that change a reality. But even in this trying and unprecedented period, I have hope. I have hope in part because of institutions like this board are committed to tackling fundamental issues of fairness and equality in our criminal justice system and in policing. This is work that the board has been on the cutting edge of since its inception. And I'm here today as California's Attorney General to help amplify your voices and amplify your message. Your work addressing bias in policing is critical. Today, what we see in those who have bravely marched in our streets to demand justice is a crisis of confidence in our law enforcement institutions. For too many, particularly Black Americans and others of color, we see our police departments as a source of anxiety, and sometimes that view runs deeply counter to the fundamental need for trust. From moms and professional athletes to heartbroken families, the call for change is loud, and the call for change is clear. It's not enough to simply stand in solidarity. We must have the will and the courage to act. And importantly, we must have a blueprint to act upon, one that is grounded in data and facts. We all talk about evidence-based solutions, data-driven policy, and the data here is critical. And I'll keep repeating that. That's why this board's work is so critical. Your recommendations and your analysis help set the stage for change that we must all be a part of. We talk in California about being on the cutting edge, the vanguard going first. And in this forward-leaning state, the board has already been a key part of the vision to address bias in policing, including by looking at bias by proxy through false or ill-informed calls for police assistance. When police are called against bird watchers in Central Park or people standing outside their homes in San Francisco, those are the kinds of basic fundamental challenges that we have to work to address. These are the kinds of challenges the board helps put in perspective and help to overcome. And in the report released at the beginning of this year, the board, with the assistance of our personnel at the California Department of Justice, huge shout out to them, analyzed nearly 4 million vehicle stops across California's 15 largest law enforcement agencies, an incredible amount of data, a huge data set. And we found that people who were perceived as black were searched at 2.5 times the rate of people perceived as white. And while officers stopped more than twice as many people perceived as white, there were more individuals who were perceived as black who ended up being searched, detained on the curb or in a patrol car, handcuffed, or removed from their vehicles. And that is something we have to address. We might not be able to speak to precisely what causes that to happen, but nevertheless, it is a disturbing picture, and it's something that we have to work to change. And in the most recent report, the board issued a broad range of forward-thinking recommendations for law enforcement, community members, and policymakers, and it included thoughtful analysis based on the largest data set ever collected on peace officer stops. So that's incredible work. That's part of being on the cutting edge. And by 2022, nearly all law enforcement agencies in California will be required to collect detailed information regarding their stops and searches. That's over 400 agencies across the state, an unprecedented in-depth look into everyday policing in California. So just really critical stuff, really important work. And soon our agencies and our lawmakers and our communities will have direct access to even more key information and help make better decisions for our communities. And beyond the report itself, our researchers at the California Department of Justice have made the data even more accessible by making it available on our Open Justice platform. For instance, anyone, journalists, researchers, or members of the public can take a unique look at what time of day stops are occurring, the reason for the stops, where they are occurring in the state, and the perceived demographics of those being stopped. And we have to remember that each and every one of these stops represents a real person, a real Californian's interaction with law enforcement. Many might be positive, helpful interactions, and others might be something different. We've all seen the devastating consequences of what can happen when these interactions go wrong, and no one should live in fear of those who are sworn to protect us. So I'm speaking to you here today because we know there is nothing more important for public safety than trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve. It's important that we build that and cultivate that and sustain that trust. And as you work to develop the next report, it's time to redouble our efforts and launch even further ahead. California is looking to you for guidance, and I urge law enforcement and legislators across the state to take your recommendations to heart and put them into practice, turn them into that action and that change that I know we all know we need. As Attorney General of the state, I'll do my part to amplify your message so that you are heard loudly and so that you are heard clearly. And before I conclude, I'd like to just quickly acknowledge the hard work of my team at the California Department of Justice, researchers, information technology experts, program analysts, and attorneys for their efforts in supporting the mission of the RIPA board. As a legislator who helped bring this board to life, it's very humbling for me to see all that you have accomplished already together, and I look forward to the additional work ahead. So with that, let me just let me end where I began with a huge debt of gratitude and thanks and appreciation for your leadership and our partnership. Look forward to continuing to working with you and supporting you, and I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Attorney General Bunta, for those words and sentiments, and we all share your aspirations for the board and look forward to another productive year and rolling this program out across the state and learning what we'll see and using that to inform policy. Thank you very much for speaking to us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay, so our next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the April 13th, 2021 meeting. So we all received an email on January 4th, I believe, it should say from RIPA in your inbox. And so if we can take a few minutes just to review those, and then if there are amendments, we can add them, and if not, if someone would submit it or offer a motion to approve, we could move forward. So let's just take a few minutes to review the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve?
I'll make it, John.
Motion to
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes.
This is Lawanda. I second it.
So,
Actually,
Nancy,
hi, this is Nancy Frausto. Just a correction, my name was not included on those present, so and we can just make that change.
thank you for that, Nancy.
Well, then I'll amend my motion to approve the minutes pending the change of adding the name.
Lawanda, would you like the second?
I second that.
Okay.
The removal.
Thank you. Nancy, do we need to have a vote to approve the minutes?
Yes, you just need to vote, but it doesn't have to be a roll call vote. So maybe you could ask if there's anybody opposed to approving the minutes.
Okay, great. Are any board members opposed to approving the minutes? Okay, so the minutes have been approved. Okay, so next we have an update from the Department of Justice. So we'll turn it over to our DOJ partners.
Hi everyone, this is Allison Elgart. I'm going to turn it over to Tanya Koshi first, who's going to give a brief update on the regulatory fixes that we've all been talking about.
Thanks, Allison. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tanya Koshi. I'm a Deputy Attorney General with the Civil Rights Enforcement Section. As many of you know, and I'll just give a very quick background, we've been in the process of proposing amendments to the existing regulations. And since the last board meeting, we have entered into the internal approval process, and we are hopefully in the final stages of that internal approval. And our hope and our goal is to have these amendments, the proposed amendments, approved internally by the end of the month, and then to submit them to the Office of Administrative Law at the end of the month, and for them to publish them publicly by early July. What that does is it triggers a rulemaking process, including a 45-day commentary period, during which we will have one public hearing. Following that 45 days, we will have an additional public hearing on the same day that we will have a board meeting. We've already checked in with Chief Swing and Board Member Raphael about their availability, and I will be, either I or someone else from the department will be circulating a doodle poll for the other board members to get your availability for a board meeting the week of August 22nd or August 29th. And like I said earlier, we'll have the board meeting, and then immediately after that, we'll have the public hearing. So we'll have the benefit of both the board's insight and feedback, as well as the public's on that same day. And so if you have any questions in the meanwhile, happy to answer them.
Tanya, I just would add that, again, this is, as she mentioned, that it's all dependent upon everything going smoothly. So in terms, there's a lot of steps with regard to submitting these to the Office of Legislative Affairs. So that's what we're shooting for. That is our goal. But you know, it could be there could be a bump in the road, but we will let you know. And I just also want to say that we really appreciate all of the feedback that we got from the subcommittee, and that we're really excited to bring this to the board, to the full board, and that this process that we're using was the same process we used during the first rulemaking. So, so really appreciate that and look forward to those discussions.
Fantastic. Do any board members have questions for Tanya or Nancy about the pending changes to the regs?
Anya, I think it would be helpful for the new board member and for the general public to get a summary of what those changes are.
Sure. And so sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Hold on one second. So like Nancy said, we're going to be discussing them in full at that board meeting, hopefully in late August. But generally speaking, what we're proposing are amendments that will hopefully clarify existing reporting obligations. There will also be, we're hoping to propose just a few additional data elements that officers would have to report with each stop. But I think on balance, our goal here is to streamline the reporting process and also to provide additional context for each stop, so that when the board does its analysis of stops, they'll have additional information in order to understand whether there's racial or identity profiling. That's a pretty broad summary, but I think we'll get into more detail at that board meeting in August. If any board member or member of the public would like to have some additional context, it might be helpful to take a look at the Stop Data Subcommittee meeting that we held in November 2020. Many of those proposals that will be hopefully publicized in July were discussed in November. There have been a few changes since then, but for the most part, they're substantively the same.
Thanks.
Thank you, Tanya. Are there any other questions for Tanya? Okay, not hearing any others. Nancy, are there further updates from DOJ?
Yes, we have Erin Choi from the research, from the CGIS, sorry, who will be giving an update on the data.
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to address the board and for all of your time. We know you have a full agenda today, but we just wanted to report back with a quick status update on the work we have underway with the agencies. And I also want to just take a brief minute to introduce a couple of new resources on the CGIS management team that will be kind of coordinating our efforts as well. In the future, you may hear from them with updates. So Arwen, were you able to join us? Do you want to get started with a brief introduction? Okay, she might have be having some technical difficulties as well, but we have a new assistant director, Arwen Flint, who was recently assigned to our branch. So she'll be a resource for the board going forward, and you may receive periodic updates from her. Then I'll turn things over to Alice if you would like to give a brief introduction.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name's Alice Delvey-Williams. I am the new program manager under the Client Services Program, reporting to Erin and Arwen.
So Alice is bringing a lot of experience working on other DOJ projects, not only with agencies, but as well as their vendors. So in the coming months, as we continue that big push to get all of the agencies compliant, she'll be one of our many valued team members. So thank you, Alice. With that, I'm going to just briefly turn off my camera so we can pivot into a quick run through of a presentation. For today, we just wanted to highlight a few discussion topics. First to recap the agencies that are submitting data for 2020 and provide a status update of the agencies that are collecting for 2021, and then just highlight all the activities that will be focused on through the end of the year. So for a quick summary of the data collection, this original legislation put together a very specific timeline as far as when agencies were due to collect. We have been receiving reports from these largest agencies, but starting in 2021, we added an additional set, and then we're working to get everybody on board by January 1st of 2022. So for the next board report and the analysis that's underway, you heard AG Bonta mention that we had received over 4 million stop records for 2020. This is the list of agencies that are represented in that 2020 data set. The Wave 1 and Wave 2 agencies, you've previously been able to analyze their data, but for 2020, we have these additional 3 agencies that will be represented in the data set: Bakersfield PD, Davis PD, and LA Schools PD. And then as of January 1st of 2021, the quote-unquote Wave 3 agencies were added. So we have these new group of 12 agencies that are currently collecting the data. So that brings us to a total of 30 agencies that are currently collecting this stop data. I took a quick look at the stats this morning, and it looks like we're currently receiving records from 17 of the 30. So as you may know, agencies are only required to submit to DOJ on an annual basis, but we do try to encourage, if at all possible, that they submit periodically throughout the year. So of the 30, we currently have already received records from 17 of the 30 for 2021. Some of the other activities that are in progress, I'm really excited that over 30 agencies are electing to start collecting data early, and will begin as of July 1st. So this time next month, we will more than double the number of reporting agencies. And then over the next 6 months, CGIS will be continuing to work closely with the remaining 400 agencies, which will all be due to start collecting this data set as of January 1st. So we have a number of recurring meetings with them, kind of work through different phases of the project and have a specific timeline to try to make sure that everything is staying on track. Really, our goal is that by December 1st, every agency has confirmed their readiness. So between now and then, we are very busy with a lot of testing and training work with the agencies, and we'll definitely be keeping the board and other stakeholders updated as we continue to push ahead. Right now, the 400 plus agencies are in the process of finalizing how they're going to be submitting their records to DOJ. And then once they have that finalized, we kind of put them on certain tracks to have specialized testing and training with them. So that's a quick status update. Again, thank you for your time. If you have any questions or if anything else would be helpful, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Thank you, Erin. I have one question. Do you have, is it harder, or do you have specific challenges with smaller agencies perhaps that might not have as deep a stable of IT non-sworn staff, or is it generally going smooth across all of them?
I'd say that it's generally going smooth, but you know, as you kind of noted, they do have different challenges. Sometimes that can make it easier because we know exactly who to go to, you know, and the communications are a bit more streamlined. We will have a breakdown soon to show kind of the distribution of how they are going to be collecting their data. So for folks who are newer to the board, just to let you know, DOJ does host an application that agencies can use for free. So we have been kind of anticipating that some of the smaller agencies may utilize that more if they don't have as many IT resources to develop, you know, their own application. But with that said, actually, since there are so many more agencies that are in the process of implementing, we've seen a big increase in some of the CAD RMS vendors offering different products. So a large number of these 400 are utilizing kind of vendor products, and we're testing all of those out. So a little bit different for sure, but no major concerns or issues that we're running into.
Thank you, Erin. Do any board members have questions for Erin? Okay, seeing none. Well, thanks so much for the presentation, and I'll turn it back to Nancy. Or are there further updates from the Department of Justice? Oh, sorry, Nancy.
Hi, sorry. Just took a sec. We are really excited. Again, we have a lot of special guests today, and the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards is one of our partners in this project. There's a huge component that involves working with POST to ensure that trainings, reflect, proper and appropriate, concepts regarding how to eliminate racial and identity profiling. We are really excited to have Manny Alvarez, who is the executive director of POST, come to the meeting today and speak to us a little bit about some of the work that you all have been doing and developing and working in consultation with POST and the POST subcommittee. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Manny.
Thank you, Nancy. Good morning. Can you hear me? Is this okay? Okay. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you to the RIPA board for allowing me to speak today, as well as DOJ for coordinating my ability to speak before you. My name is Manny Alvarez. I'm the executive director of POST, as Nancy mentioned. I am appointed by the commission. The commission is made up of 18 members, 15 of which are appointed by the governor. One is a permanent position for the Department of Justice or the Attorney General, and two of the commissioners are appointed by the legislature. One by the Assembly, by the Speaker, and one by the President of the Senate. So we serve the state of California. We currently have approximately 612 law enforcement agencies that participate in the POST program. It is a voluntary program. Most state law enforcement agencies participate, but there are approximately 30 or so that do not for various reasons. But we do have 600 plus agencies that were responsible for setting hiring standards, auditing those hiring standards, setting training standards, and auditing the training requirements. That is our mission. We're made up of 135 state employee staff members, and we are responsible from the time individuals are going through the academy or through basic training all the way through the time that they retire or finish their appointment at a law enforcement agency. For both peace officers and public safety dispatchers, we have two sister agencies, one that is responsible for the correction side of the house at the California Department of Corrections, California, or CPOST, and then we have another sister agency that is responsible for the probation officers across the state, as well as for some of the correction officers that work at county jails, and that is an agency called STC. I want to just give you a quick update on two items, and also to thank members of the RIPA board for their participation in bias and profiling training. We're currently in the development phase of a self-paced course for officers, rank and file officers, as well as supervisors. I want to thank various board members, many of which were in this meeting, for participating in the officer update. We're in the throes of it, and we hope to have it done and deployed to the field within the next 3 to 6 months. Also, I wanted to mention we have received some questions from some of the members of the board, as well as from the Department of Justice and various other agencies across the state on AB 846, which is bias screening during the psychological screening process for peace officers. We are in the middle of that. That is to be completed by January 1, pursuant to AB 846. If you are interested in finding out about the progress of that and who all is participating as collaborators on that project, we have a series of or a number of different practitioners from across the country that are participating. They are listed on the bulletin as well as their bios. It is the latest bulletin that was issued by POST 2 weeks ago, That can be found on our post website under post.ca.gov, please, and then bulletins. That is listed there, and it gives the very specifics of where we are with the process. We should hopefully have that done in the next few months. And then lastly, I do know that there has been some interest from some of the members of the board in reviewing 2 different components of the Basic Academy, and I believe you are all, some of you are participating in some of that training or observing some of that training, specifically in regards to policing in the community, as well as cultural diversity training that's being done at the academies. Please let us know if there's anything we can do to facilitate your participation in those training sessions with new cadets and recruits. I just want to thank you for the participation of all of you. What you do and the feedback that you're providing, and sometimes the pushback, is very positive for us. It makes us better, and we definitely appreciate your involvement. I want to thank you for the opportunity today, and thank you for everything you do. And then lastly, I want to give my condolences to Sheriff McMahon for the death of Sergeant Vaca. My condolences, Sheriff. And Nancy, that concludes my presentation to you today. Thank you once again for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Manny.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Would you be able to take a few questions if board members have questions for you, Mr. Alvarez?
Absolutely, sir. I'd be happy to.
Okay. Well, maybe we can open it up in the event that anyone has a question about these different trainings or 846 or any other manner that you'd like to ask of Post.
Of course. My pleasure.
Do we have any questions from board members? Okay, looks like you're off the hook. Okay.
Well, thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity. I apologize for not asking.
No, thank you, Mr. Alvarez. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Okay, Nancy. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manny. And thank you, Steve. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison to give a few of the additional updates on the logistics in the report and what's going on with our reviews.
Thank you, Nancy. Hi, everyone. This is Allison Elgart from the EG's office. So first, on the heels of Manny speaking, I did want to give everyone the update. Some of the members of the Post subcommittee had expressed an interest in attending and observing some of the trainings that law enforcement officers are receiving, particularly the academy trainings. And so we have reached out and are compiling a list of some of those trainings, including CHP. So we thank you, Commissioner Ray, for that. And so we will send all of you the list of the potential trainings that you will be able to attend. We've also reached out, I know, to San Bernardino and Sheriff McMahon. So we are compiling the list and we will send it to all of you within a week or so. And so if you could please let us know, and we're trying to find a variety of trainings so people in different parts of the state might be able to observe them if they can. So we wanted to open it up to the full board and not just the Post subcommittee. So you'll all receive a follow-up email from us with details and asking you to RSVP if you would like to observe any of those trainings, which will all be going on this summer. And if you cannot attend those, there may be future opportunities to do so, but we wanted to try to do that this summer so some of you are able to get in as soon as you can. And lastly, for the report, I just wanted to give a brief overview. I know the next item on the agenda after the break is the board discussion of the report. You all got a chance to see some drafts of the report. As you can tell, everything is a work in progress, and we don't yet have the data analysis since it only comes in by April 1st. So it takes the Research Center some time to work through all of the data and work through some of the analysis. So that is not yet in the report. But what you do have in front of you and what we sent to you all and posted on the website for members of the public are drafts of some of the sections of the report. Some are more developed than others, but really we wanted to use this meeting as an opportunity to get all of your feedback on the different sections of the report. You know, if there are areas you'd like to focus on, you know, as we mentioned in the last report or the last board meeting, we have different, in addition to the data analysis, what we're doing this year is having some particular focus sections, which take some of the data analysis and then look at potentially data driving potential policy and other, you know, best practices, next practices. As Andrea mentioned, we thought it was a great term to use since some of these are very new and developing. And so that's some of what you have in the draft report, is the development of some of those more focused sections that really look at policy and data together, as well as the sections that you've all, you know, become accustomed to reviewing in terms of civilian complaints, you know, policies and accountability, calls for service, and bias by proxy. And so I just wanted to give you all that brief overview, and you'll have a chance in the next agenda item to get into a, you know, a deeper discussion of all of this. And we really look forward to all of your feedback, all of your questions, all of your comments, so that we can keep working on developing the report. And by the time of the next meeting, we'll have, you know, much more developed report plus analysis, but we wanted to present you all with the research that's been done so far and some of the sections that have been, you know, that are in development, so you can see where the sections are going. So that's it, but I'm happy to answer questions if you all have any. And, you know, we're really looking forward to receiving all of your feedback in the next agenda item.
Thank you, Allison. Are there any questions for Allison? Oh, well, we'll have a more rigorous discussion after our break. Okay, well, if so, are there? Am I understand there are no further updates from DOJ?
That is it. So, oh, Nancy came on, so I don't know if.
No, I was going to say we don't have any additional updates. So we are actually well ahead of schedule. We had planned our break for 11:30, so we could shift right into board discussion of the report contents, and then take our break at 11:30 if that works for folks, or we could take a short break now. It's up to you.
A short break now would be appreciated.
Yeah, why don't we take a break now, and should we reconvene at 11:30? Does that sound okay? Or 11:20? We give everybody roughly a half hour. How about 11:20? We'll come back.
Yeah, 11:20 sounds great. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. So we'll reconvene shortly. All right, everybody, welcome back. So let's get started again. So we could move on to our. Maybe I should check to make sure our DOJ partners are back. Nancy and Allison.
Yes.
Oh, I see you there. Okay. All right. Okay. So next on our agenda, item 6, board discussion of the 2022 report content. Is there a presentation that we're going to start with, or should we jump into open questions?
We don't have any presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Allison. She might be able to help facilitate the best way to go through the discussion.
Yeah, we don't have a presentation. Thank you, Nancy. It's really however the board would like to proceed with the discussion. If you'd like to go section by section, if everybody, you know, if there are particular sections that you all want to comment on, give feedback on, if there are things you don't see that you would like to see, we can also let you know some of the sections that, you know, are still in development that were not yet included. But I think, you know, we sent you all the outline, and so however you all would like to proceed, whether you want to go section by section or have an open discussion about anything you all would like to talk about.
If I can suggest section by section, since we do have outside members participating, that way we can know that everything got covered.
That sounds good. Okay, well, we can do that. So why don't we just go to the outline, and we could start with the section on implicit bias, explicit bias, and systemic racism.
Actually, could we start at the beginning from the top with the context setting?
Oh, sure. Sure, that's fine.
Great, thank you.
Andrea,
Yes,
go ahead.
yes, I have a suggestion, which is to take notice of the opinion research that the Public Policy Institute of California, commonly known as PPIC, is doing in asking Californians about their views on policing. In 2020, PPIC did they do a statewide survey, and they ask people about their views on government. And they did a survey in February of 2020 and another in September of 2021. And they do, about every 6 months or so, they do these statewide surveys. And what we're seeing is a dramatic decline in trust in policing, and we're seeing that data by ethnicity. So I think it would be appropriate for this board to include in its annual report, the PPIC monitoring of views on policing. I think it's a, high integrity opinion survey instrument that will help us lay the context for what's going on. We already have in there in the outline a discussion of the racial justice protests that went on over the last year, but I think this would help standardize our understanding of how people are feeling about policing. To include the statewide survey results from PPIC for the relevant year on Californians' views on policing.
Okay. Does anyone else have comments on the opening section, on our contextual section? That's a great comment, by the way.
This is Allison again. I will thank you, Andrea, for that suggestion, and we can definitely incorporate that. We've also been talking in some of the subcommittee meetings about how to bring the data to life and how to make it, bring it to the point where everyone reading the report around California really understands the impact of the data on the everyday lives of Californians. And so, the PPIC survey is one way to do that and to look at how people are viewing, policing and how they feel in their communities. But if you all have other ideas about that as another way to contextualize the data, we'd also love to hear those.
Well, on that front, I having participated, or I sort of took the online post or the training course on racial profiling, and I thought they had some quite good sort of first-person accounts of experiences that people had. One as a college student, and other people that just over the course of their lives, and it really added a lot to the training, I thought. And so I don't. Sometimes it's hard to get a, ethnographic work as a skill in and of itself, and finding people to speak to and doing it in a way that's representative is not particularly easy, but having some firsthand accounts of, both from the public and from officers, I think that would be, help sort of make things real.
Well, so many of you probably have seen the video that we did the first year that the board released its report. We tried to get comments from the public, and we videotaped them, some after the board meeting in Stockton, and then we tried to take some of the public comment, and that was one of the ways that we tried to weave, what the community was feeling into this report. We also had like little comment bubbles where we took quotes from folks and put them throughout. So I think that's something that I think is what we're trying to get at. And I guess the question to you all, because you're all have really creative ways of looking at things and great suggestions, is how do we do that? Like, how can we incorporate what the community's feeling? I think that's, why we wanted to do the, I think it's a great idea to have that survey, because that is really a great resource and can get that. But how do we then really tie that to what the data is showing us and like really highlight the what this is impacting, like how it's really impacting people on the ground?
And so to jump off of what Nancy said, if you all have ideas about how to get at the community comments that could be interwoven in the report, we've thought about a survey that's more qualitative and asking people to, we could also ask people to submit comments. You could all talk to your constituents and pass along comments. But however, we wanted to bring it to the board to think about how we might be able to do this, because we do think it's important to get the community voices in there. And so, and all members of the community. So that includes law enforcement, it includes, people who are advocates, people who are community members who, have more interactions with the police. And so we wanted to ask all of you for your ideas. And if you come up with them later and want to send them to us, we're happy with that as well. But we wanted to bring it to the meeting today too, to see if you all had ideas about that.
I have a suggestion, if possible. More live participation, like in that similar town hall manner, something like that, where you're actually seeing the faces, the voices, you're hearing everything live, as opposed to a more anonymous survey or something like that. I think that has a lot more impact when you can hear directly from the community, as opposed to a bar graph or a pie chart or a spreadsheet or something like that. I think live participation is important, and I think if we can get more of that, even just something where you can show something more live or actual participation, as opposed to the remote participation, I think that's better.
So the question that DOJ staff you're posing is how to bring the data alive in the report that we're charged with putting together, right? I mean, I agree with Mr. Hampton that that hearing more of the community's voices is important, but I think our value add to this issue and this work as a RIPA board is to provide the data, analyze the data. Certainly, we can bring it alive with with pull-out quotes and maybe produce a short video or something that brings it alive, but I would not want that to take away from, in terms of resources or staff capacity, from the analysis that is our value add. There are lots of people doing focus groups, there are lots of people doing opinion research, and certainly we can think about as a complementary effort, like a listening session. But I think what the public yearns for is the data in a digestible format that is actionable, right? That we can understand and then react to. And I think that's where our energy should go.
Okay, does anybody have further comment on this topic?
I do. Felicia Espinosa, Root and Rebound from Fresno. I don't know if one way to be able to merge the two is locally and in terms of our constituents, we know how the data is being interpreted or what advocacy groups are using it locally to be able to have that storytelling. And I don't know if in our reports, maybe we can link to that or give reference to that. What comes to mind here in Fresno is a few months ago, we had a Fresno Bee article, local newspaper that very much referenced the data points from the RIPA board and also took storytelling from local community members in terms of what it feels like to, driving while Black, right? What it feels like to be pulled over, how many times they pulled over. All of that is part of the local newspaper article. And maybe if we can highlight that in ways other people are already merging it, which then may not take away time from the DOJ in collecting those stories because they're already out there, and they're already out there in terms of how this data points are affecting our local communities. So that's one suggestion that I have. And I also think one of our add values in addition to data and analyzing is very much giving recommendations as well, making sure that that's part of where we're going forward starting this year. I think of like the public comment we got from the ACLU today, but also earlier when it comes to, walking while transgender, right, which is similar to driving while Black. And recommendations is a great add value that we as a board can do to change the way policing is done here in the state. Thank you.
Okay. And maybe I'll just highlight a comment in the chat that suggests inviting community groups to load narratives on a web page, perhaps hosted by RIPA. I don't know if that's possible technologically, but it's an interesting suggestion. Shall we move on to the next section? Okay, so I think now we're in, so there's a section on implicit bias, explicit bias, and systemic racism. The first part has to do with the effects of COVID-19 on policing over the past year and a half or so, and all of the questions that arise. I think we're probably a little early because we don't have the data yet, so we can't see, but we know that a lot of interactions are down, and unfortunately some very high traumatic instances are up statewide and nationwide. So I don't know how much we have to add at this point, but perhaps we should have some discussion of what people would like to see with regards to COVID-19. I think everybody's tired of COVID-19.
Well, this is David Swing. I can share that from a law enforcement perspective that what's identified here about the impact on data collected, that our stop data is going to be lower in 2020. And I think we'll see that as we compare the data sets from 2019. It's the same agencies reported in 2020, and I'm sure we'll see market declines in overall stop data numbers. I am curious about number one, the differential enforcement of COVID-19 ordinances and orders. Is that was that a board recommended item, or is that a recommendation from DOJ staff?
This is Allison Elgart from DOJ. That was brought up last year during a discussion of topics for this coming year, because COVID-19 was raised as an issue last year, but because it was affecting the data that was coming in this year, it was a recommendation for this report in looking into and there were articles, there were a lot of news articles and other, other resources discussing how different COVID-19 orders and mandates were disproportionately affecting different communities. And in some, there were reports in some cases of communities of color, for example, having enforcement actions taken in certain communities that were not taken in others, in terms of gatherings, in terms of other mandates. And so that was something that was brought up, I believe I don't know which meeting last year, but one of the meetings last year as something to just look into. I do remember a New York Times article about it, and there were several local articles about differing enforcement actions taken in different communities. So that was something that we were going to explore.
But it was brought up by the board.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right.
Especially when it was brought up by the board.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't recall that, and I know you guys at DOJ have copious notes of the board recommendations, and so I'd be curious to hear how what that looks like in California specifically, as opposed to the national conversation on that topic.
Yeah, we had talked about, and you had provided input, Chief Swing. We had talked about what the enforcement mechanisms were around COVID, and things were in flux. And things have changed since. But we talked about how that would show up in records as a violation of a local ordinance or state law, and whether it was trackable. And whether we would see it in the RIPA data, right, when we were looking at the codes for what people were stopped for, whether we would see that. And you had provided suggestions on how that might what a code might look like. What the code, this is your world, not mine. What the policing would look like for enforcement, and whether there was anything worth noting there or not. And without seeing the data, I wouldn't be able to say. But it's less relevant now than it was at the beginning when we had very strict orders.
The other agenda item there that perhaps we should talk about is the impact of some of the, or if we're looking at, and I don't know if the RIPA data will pick this up, but contacts associated with the protests in summer 2020. It's on it's part B of the explicit bias section, or section 3. And maybe DOJ, I know you haven't looked at the data yet, but what do the regs say about stops during public demonstrations? Are those supposed to be recorded in RIPA?
So the stops that essentially require discretion of the officer and reasonable suspicion to stop someone are recorded in the data. What's not recorded is when, they may do a blanket sweep for safety, of a big crowd. But if people are stopped during protest, if people are searched, if people are arrested, essentially if there are actions taken because of probable cause or reasonable suspicion, then that would be recorded in the stop data.
And it's unclear whether the data will actually tell us much here, but I think this is more important, not for the data, because the data comes later, right? This section was really more important, I think, about setting the context for the year, and that we were in, and that goes to the opinion research also, and what was happening in California while this data was being collected.
In the spirit of that suggestion too, I wonder perhaps if we should be thinking about other contextual factors, like what happened to crime, what happened to arrests overall during this time period, and other data sources that are at that DOJ collects and might help to contextualize what we see this year. Because there were some important changes that are temporary nonetheless, but are pretty profound.
Hi, this is Brendan, Alameda County Public Defender. I was curious about that section right there, because I was wondering if we're going to get any sort of data on use of force against protesters. This is probably outside of the scope with disparate treatment with regards to charging, looting charges, as opposed to burglary or paid theft charges, and whether the use of force that was used came within police department policy or was outside of the scope of policy. Those are all the thoughts I had with regards to that one section.
Those are really interesting things and to think of and include. And I would, as Kevin on the line, because from our research center, because I don't know if we would know if something was from a protest unless we saw a large amount of people being like a stop data report for like, I don't know, 25, 30 people all in one incident. And then we could then really kind of like reverse engineer like what was the date and when did that incident happen and was this a protest? But I see Kevin is here, so maybe you can address that, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. So you're correct. So it's possible that as Allison was talking about earlier, if officers took reportable actions towards individuals would require the collection of stop data, those stops and interactions should be reflected in the RIPA stop data. It would be a difficult task to identify those within the data because there are not specific identifiers that basically let us easily parse out and filter down to stops that happened within the context of a protest. And so we need to have things like lists of locations or cities where specific protests happened on certain days and then be looking for specific types of offense codes in the reason for stop or the basis for, not basis, sorry, in the result of stop, whether that be a citation or an arrest that was made, looking for specific types of charges that officers indicated there. That doesn't really give us a look at charging decisions by a DA, obviously. That would solely be based on things that officers entered in as the basis for arresting or issuing citations to individuals, but actually identifying stops that occurred at protests in a reliable manner be exceedingly difficult within the structure of the RIPA data. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it will require a lot of resources and quite a bit of from different groups throughout the state for us to be able to identify the places and states at which protests occurred. So I don't want to say it's not possible, but within the context of all the other asks for analysis this year, it may be quite a big charge to also take on. I don't know if I answered all of the questions there.
So yeah, Kevin, it sounds like you're saying and pointing out the RIPA data structure, all the collection efforts really weren't designed. They were designed with an eye to day-to-day policing and not necessarily these particular events. But if there is interest in seeing if that can be captured in the data, as you and Nancy were suggesting, maybe it's can be hard to find it systematically across the state, but maybe to pick, for example, in Long Beach in a given day, there were some protests and there might be knowledge of particular actions that happened that date. So rather than trying to look into the data and see where there are larger groups of stops, picking a known date where there were, and then looking to see if that was captured at all within the data, as if there's interest in going down this line as sort of a mini snapshot rather than a statewide look. I mean, it would have to be a municipality that's already collecting data. I think Long Beach is one. So that was one that came to mind. But
like focusing in on a specific, if the board wanted to choose a specific known protest that occurred on a given day or a few day period.
Or in Los Angeles on Fairfax, there was a particular day where there was a large police action, large protest, but also police action. Instead of trying to look across the whole RIPA data set and try to spot where there's those are to pick a known event and then see if that was recorded or not. Or as Allison pointed out, if there's a large sweep, maybe the data collection didn't happen in a traditional way.
I also wonder whether this is not the answer to this question, maybe not in the stop data, but in other California DOJ data that is collected on charging, and that could speak to our broader mandate to end racial identity profiling. And that might be an easier lift than trying to cull it out of the stop data.
Complicates the conversation is an outside group intentionally violent such a process.
Yeah, I'm thinking of other data sources for information about, I mean, charging decisions are sometimes reflected in alternative data sources like the automated criminal history system, but I'm not a person who works with that data source very often, so I can't tell you whether or not there are things within that data set that would allow for us to parse out charges or bookings related to individuals who were detained at protests. But it's something that perhaps we can bring to some of the groups within DOJ who have in-depth knowledge of that data specifically and see if there's something that they think that we could do that would be an easier approach than trying to parse out information from RIPA.
Mm-hmm. So I was looking at incident level data from LAPD last week, and they have on their webpage actually like incident by incident with dates, timestamp, longitude. I think even longitudinal, latitudinal coordinates. But by day, there were a couple of days, I think in early June, where you see reports of burglary that are just many standard deviations above what it typically is. And my guess would be that those are two or three, I can't remember how many they were, but those must have been days when there were mass demonstrations. So it might be possible to identify demonstration days using something like crime reports or arrests that are occurring. And then, we could use that to triage something with the RIPA data for specific jurisdictions.
An interesting idea.
Very interesting. Dr. Raphael, and I want to ride on your back what you said and what Andrea said regarding ending racial identity profiling. That's huge, especially when we talk about crime victims, especially when we talk about minority crime victims, Black crime victims. It affects them too on how their interaction with law enforcement. And you are more likely to be a victim of a crime if you're minority and not to get the assistance. And that we noticed a lot in 2020 with the stations being closed and we being told that we had to go to the internet. So that may create a problem with people identifying other interactions with law enforcement too, with them not having access to it. Law enforcement, not in 2020 because of COVID-19. We did not have access to the stations we didn't have access to it. But it also affects crime victims. And you said you read the LAPD's thing, and you heard also too that homicide has shot up. It's off the hook. And then the majority of the people are people of color. And they're not getting the service because of this racial identity profiling. It's a major issue. And I just wanted to insert that because we talk about stops, but we're not saying anything. It affects both sides. Crime victims are being denied service because of this.
Yes, thank you for that comment. It's important to acknowledge what's happened over the past year. And indeed, there has been a rise in homicide in California and across the country. And, I don't know how that's going to impact reporting this year, or perhaps I don't know. Maybe we need to have some at least description of what was going on crime-wise in the state and how things have shifted for the year. Okay, shall we move on to the next section? I don't want to rush anybody. Okay, all right. Open all my windows at once. It's modern problems. So our section 4, which is the analysis of stop data, it looks structurally very similar to what we did last year, but we'll be doing it with the new data. I don't know, perhaps if we want to entertain the suggestion of waiting until we have the results to discuss that and to move on to the policy-specific data analysis in 5, or do we want to revisit the issues of discovery rate analysis and veil of darkness and use of force? We did hear some questions about use of force raised by Board Member Woods. Perhaps we should spend a minute here. So this is part 4 on our outline. Or I guess it would be chapter 4 in the outline.
Can I just ask, and maybe this is to Kevin, the primary reason for stop, might that include more about, like, for example, moving versus equipment violations? Because I remember in the last board meeting, there was a discussion about probing a little bit further into the basis of stop. Were you imagining that this would be a place for it?
Yeah, this can be a place where we dive a little bit deeper there. That's captured when officers indicate that the primary reason for stop was either a traffic violation or a reasonable suspicion stop. They also will indicate in a subfield what type of traffic violation they are reporting observing, or what type of what gave rise to their reasonable suspicion for those 2 categories. So we could do a little bit deeper of a dive in that introduction section, breaking these down into those subcategories, whereas in previous reports, it's primarily focused on the high level. This percentage were traffic stops, this percentage were reasonable suspicion stops, and we don't use the subfields in the introduction section. We use them in some of the later analyses when breaking down specific types of stops to look at. I believe there was also an idea to use some of those subfields in some of the later sections that I think that we'll talk about today as well, looking at differences across gender potentially in that section of the report, in types of offenses that individuals were stopped for, was, I think, primarily where we talked about using those subfields in previous board meetings this year. But if there's interest in including a further breakdown in this kind of breakdown descriptive intro that we're talking about here in section 4, we could also add some of that as well.
I guess I was remembering that maybe as board member Ochoa in particular we had talked about as a board starting to look at what the violation was in greater detail and seeing if there are disparities with a sort of a finer gradation than just what was the broad basis for a stop, moving versus equipment. And so I just was wondering, as the report evolves, if that would be, you were imagining that it might, this might be a place for it in a first stab at that. I just wasn't sure in the later sections where it might go. So I guess I'm just reminding us that we were interested in looking more deeply at basis for stop.
I think that was in the context of pretext stops.
That's what I was going to say. I was looking
okay.
at the page number.
And beginning to look,
draft.
and that actually was not, because this outline was the same outline that was sent to the board for the April meeting. I think the idea was that it would be around, as part of section 5, the focus on sections, and getting an initial analysis from the research center on what, breaking down the types of stops and seeing if we might be able to identify the codes used most frequently for those types of stops, and then use that as an introduction to sort of prime this topic and then dig deeper into it next year, because I think this year we won't, this will be the first time we're exploring this, but then I think the idea would be then to, do further research and really look into this more next year. But I think that was, I think it was envisioned as, sort of introduced in section 5 when some of these post some of these, focus sections that could then be developed next year.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Allison. I still haven't found the page yet. There's a lot there to point people to in the outline, but